Welcome back to Morning Joe. Beautiful morning in Washington, 7:48 here on the East Coast. Joining us now, member of the House Intelligence and Oversight Committees, Congresswoman Jackie Speier of California. Also with us, MSNBC chief legal correspondent and host of The Beat on MSNBC, Ari Melber. This Sunday night, Ari hosts a special live hour here on MSNBC called Trump and Ukraine Impeachment Crisis. Good morning to you both. Morning. Congresswoman Speier, I'll begin with you. In a tweet you posted just yesterday after you watched the president on the South Lawn suggest that both Ukraine and China should look into the Bidens. You wrote this: POTUS just created another article of impeachment by doing in public what he did in private, this time enlisting China to interfere in the 2020 election on behalf of his campaign. His disregard for the law is stunning. So much for his oath of office. So you believe definitively you've seen enough to vote for impeachment, not just an inquiry, but based on what you've seen, he ought to be impeached.
So, Willie, I'm going to be resolute in my commitment to look at all the facts. I do believe that as he continues to speak out, he is creating more evidence for both the Intelligence Committee and the House to take action for articles of impeachment. But what we do know now is that this is de rigueur. This is what he does on a regular basis. And I guess we should have been tipped off some months ago when he said, yeah, maybe I would accept dirt from foreign countries on my opponents. So he has so terribly created an environment, both in the White House now and the State Department, where we have to think, what kind of a country are we running? We're as corrupt as some of these other countries that he is ostensibly attempting to clean up.
Congresswoman, your committee and a couple of others released last night in a letter some text messages that show American diplomats, American political appointees working on Ukraine, talking very openly over text message about a deal with Ukraine and working on the president's behalf to get that deal and what Ukraine needed to do to get its military assistance or at least to get a White House meeting. What did you see in those text messages? Well, it's important to point out that these were on WhatsApp. So they were encrypted, and it was Ambassador Volker who made them available. I think that the State Department, particularly Mike Pompeo, had no intentions of having them made public. But I believe it's very important for the American people to see how much effort went in to trying to get the money released and to get a meeting with the president. But it was all based on whether or not they were going to do an investigation into Vice President Biden and his son Hunter. This is a character assassination campaign that the president has underway, not just with Biden, but it appears he's going to do that with many of his other opponents and use his position, which should be one of trying to bring peace and harmony around the world, but use it instead as a weapon.
Congresswoman Speier, Ari Melber here. Good to see you again. A lot of the discussion, has understandably been about this existential question of how the House may move forward on impeaching this president. And we've discussed that. I'm curious what you think should also be done on an ongoing basis to deal with what is now a multi-pronged, multi-front political effort to impact the 2020 election by Donald Trump. Meaning whatever happens with impeachment, are there ways that Congress can put extra pressure on people inside the government, inside the administration, to make sure they don't help carry out any more of these plots?
Well, we have to be very clear that we will protect whistleblowers. And that's a real challenge we have right now because the president wants to out this whistleblower. And I'm very committed to making sure this whistleblower is protected. I co-chair the whistleblower caucus in the House. And I often feel that we don't give the kind of protection to whistleblowers and the concerns that they have for retaliation. We don't protect them the way we should. I think it's also important to point out that this is a twofer for the president. Not only is he getting his so-called dirt on the Bidens, but I think he's still a puppet for Vladimir Putin. And this is his way of paying back Putin for the 2016 election cycle. And in so doing, creating this pressure to have peace talks with Russia is going to really put Ukraine in a very bad position.
So, Congresswoman, that leads to the question, Ukraine is at war still today. Rudy Giuliani's role in meddling with diplomacy, distorting diplomacy as far as the Ukraine is concerned. What's the plan for one of your committees, Intelligence, Oversight, Armed Services, I don't care which committee, to summon former Mayor Giuliani to sit before the committee and to explain just what he has been doing in the middle of this highly volatile situation?
I think at first we're going to probably want to see the Foreign Affairs look into his role. I mean, he's running a shadow State Department without being vetted, without having security clearances, without being confirmed by the Senate. It's outrageous that he has the ability and portfolio to do all that he has done. And I think many of those in the State Department, our diplomatic corps, are disgusted by what they've been required to do on his behalf.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you a question because out of that 8 hours of testimony from Kurt Volker before your committee yesterday, we had two different points of view, to the surprise of no one, from Democrats and Republicans of what they heard in that room. We had Republicans coming out and saying effectively nothing to see here. Mark Meadows said, quote, he's on oversight. What he said, quote, what we do know is there was definitely not quid pro quo. Said he sat and listened to the testimony of Kurt Volker say, now we can say definitively there was no quid pro quo. Was that your impression from the testimony of Kurt Volker?
Not at all. I think the text messages do a very good job of showing that there was quid pro quo. And more importantly, you know, you don't have to say this is quid pro quo for it to be quid pro quo. I mean, the dance that went on for months and months to just get a meeting scheduled and not having the meeting even scheduled to this date until there's an investigation announced. And as I understand it this morning, now Ukraine is going to do an investigation into the gas company and